Councillor Moulton, would you please speak to your motion? 7 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking officers who agreed to my request not to close the restaurants at Potters and Erskine Court at the end of October and instead extend the arrangement with City Catering for a further 3 months to allow alternatives to be put in place for the care needs of residents to be considered and also to allow for an enduring solution to the restaurants to be sought. Had this not happened, I am concerned that it would have been to the significant physical and mental detriment to some residents. The council has a legal duty under the Care Act to ensure that those with care needs are properly assessed and appropriate care is put in place. I think the council also has a moral obligation to its tenants who moved into these extra care facilities with the clear expectation that the council would continue to provide the services and facilities it offered when the buildings were first opened. Furthermore, the buildings have cost the housing revenue account tens of millions of pounds and should be run properly, and the investment put into the restaurants should be utilised. The purpose of this motion is not to criticise for the sake of it. Instead, it is to help ensure that lessons are learned and that the council is proactive in finding long-term solutions to meet the needs of the residents at the two courts. We should also be aware that many of the residents at the two courts are very vulnerable. Some have sight issues, some are in wheelchairs, some have dementia, some have terminal illnesses. Many cannot look after their basic needs without care. The restaurant is a lifeline, but also a place for socialising for residents who might otherwise be very lonely. And loneliness is something this council has felt very strongly about in the past, and indeed carried out a scrutiny inquiry into this issue. The decision to close the restaurants was handled terribly. It was driven by a panic need to save money, driven by a contract renewal date which was pending. The welfare of residents was given very little consideration. More consideration was given to avoiding bad press headlines, how the closure might be positioned as City Catering ending the contract voluntarily rather than the council ending it, and considerations around TUPE transfer rights for City Catering staff. This isn't speculation, as we've seen the emails received under a Freedom of Information request. The equalities and impact assessment conducted by the City Council was, in my opinion, a very poor piece of work, and political oversight seems to have been very sorely lacking. The City Council has lost considerable amounts of money on these restaurants for years. Nothing was done about it. The restaurants lost money from day one. The way the contract was structured pretty much guaranteed that there would be a loss, with City Catering just paid a management fee. There was no commercial incentives, no need to control costs, to consider pricing or to attract new customers. Both sites are in communities with large numbers of council tenants, many of whom are older folk, which might have welcomed the opportunity to come in and use these restaurants, but this wasn't taken advantage of. The council should have been managing these costs for years before now. It shouldn't have woken up to the fact that there was a huge overspend right at the point of an impending contract renewal date or end date. Options should have been looked at well in advance. Proper consultation and engagement with residents should have taken place and a range of options considered. There was no meaningful consultation. Ward councillors were not consulted and were sidelined. Care assessments should have been up to date. Large numbers of residents didn't have up-to-date care assessments at the time the closure was announced. This seemed to come as a surprise to the council, which then hastily tried to bring these up to date, although there wasn't time to do this properly and to allow residents and families to engage in the process, as is their legal right, and to agree any revised care assessments. The City Council faces considerable financial challenges. Lots more difficult decisions will be made in the coming months and years. Adults and children's care makes up most of the council's budget, and if Potters and Erskine Court experience becomes the norm, this will have a massive impact on vulnerable people. The lessons that should be learned from this are: 1, properly plan and don't make panic cuts. 2, put in place proper project management to ensure all council departments coordinate. 3, put vulnerable residents at the heart of decision making. And 4, consult and engage with residents and actually listen. Looking to the future, there are now 2.5 months until the end of January, which is the new date for the closure of the restaurants. The clock is ticking and the council needs to be proactive and lean in and support these potentially interested parties which might run the restaurant. The council needs a plan and it needs to keep residents updated. If the council is operating the restaurants at no cost, no rent, no utility charge, there is no reason why an operator cannot make a long-term success of them. The council needs to set out what service is being requested, any city council support that will be offered, timelines for any contract or licence, timeline for procurement and process, when bids need to be in by, and who is the key contact for queries and when a decision will be made. This also needs leadership from the cabinet member. So let's turn, Madam Lord Mayor, something that has been a very worrying and negative experience for residents into something positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.